we start, I would just like to just make it clear what the procedure is, just in case the people here aren't familiar with it. So whilst this is a meeting held in public, it's not a public meeting. So that means that we don't accept comments or interventions from the floor. We're restricted to members of the council, planning committee, officers and registered speakers to speak on applications. And if people do start interrupting, I will ask them to stop, and if they don't desist, I may have to ask you to leave. So I would be grateful if you could be supportive. This is a regulatory committee, and it's very important we stick to formal procedures and the relevant legislation. So just setting that out. Right, if we start on the proper agenda then, we have one public question. Is Mr. Martin here? Would you like to, sorry? Oh, sorry, I have advised I have to ask if there's any declarations of... Yes, sorry, I'm cantering ahead, I'm so excited to get to it. Sorry, Mr. Martin, 2 seconds. Do we have any apologies?
Received apologies from Councillors Akhtar, Gloucester, Vivian, Hugh, Jacks and Dean.
Thank you.
Sure. My name was down for apologies and I never sent them.
Well, you're here, Steve, so yeah. we'll register you as being in attendance, don't worry. And do we have any declarations of interest? No? Okay. Thank you. And do we have any urgent business? No. Right, Mr. Martin, it's your turn now. Sorry about that.
Well, with that.
There was apparent bias of the Labour members towards the approval of the application by First Choice Homes on Monday the 1st of July. By ignoring and not questioning the many valid points that were made to them, it was evident that their minds were made up prior to entering the meeting, thus showing a lack of respect for what should have been a fair procedure. Instead, they made it a party political decision.
Mr. Martin, this isn't the question that you've submitted.
This is the question I've submitted.
This isn't the question you've submitted, is it? That's not the question.
I submitted one for the full council and I submitted a different question. Well, we liaised with Sian at Constitutional Services, and this is the question.
Right, okay, well, can't go, it's not what we've been told.
Right, so thus showing a lack of respect for what should have been a fair procedure. Instead, they made it a past political decision, which it's alleged that the Labour councillor confirms that the Labour members were whipped. This, coupled with a voting fiasco where members were coerced and encouraged to make motions or vote, raises my question, which is, should the decisions made be declared void on the grounds of unfairness and procedural impropriety?
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Martin. As you know, I wasn't at that planning committee, and I have watched it online, so I can actually comment. I would agree that it wasn't the best run meeting that's ever happened, and there was some confusion about how the result was reported. So there was some confusion about what was actually being reported. Having said that, it's quite clear from the voting that the members of the committee, the majority of the members of the committee, chose to accept the planning officer's professional advice and recommend the application for approval. So we are confident that we've adhered to all the relevant planning legislation and policies. Constitutionally, the committee was compliant, and because of that, we do not intend to revisit that application.
Can I reply to your...
No, you can't. That's the end of it now, thank you.
I'll go accept that one, which isn't correct, because even the scores are correct on the minutes.
Right, thank you. We now move on to the minutes of that meeting as it happens. Can we have the agreement that they are the correct record? Councillor Wilson.
Well, I just have a worry about the numbers given in this report weren't what were recorded on the evening of July 1st. And I know it was very sad that we had a gentleman in the chair that had never known about planning, and I'm the first one to say he shouldn't have been chairing that meeting, and I felt very sorry for him. But I'm asking the legal team, was these the amount of time, because I remember abstentions, and according to this, on the thing, there's no abstentions, 8 against, and that wasn't what was recorded or said verbally by the chairman on July 1st. So I can't accept these minutes as being correct. It's up to other members.
Well, Councillor Hanson, if you're talking about Hodgeclough Road, it says, on being put to the vote, 3 votes were cast in favour of refusal and 5 votes were cast against with 2 abstentions. It was moved and seconded that the application be approved. On being put to the vote, 5 votes were cast in favour of the approval, 3 votes were cast against with 2 abstentions.
Yeah, I'm talking about if you move on to the one at Hodgeclough Road.
That is, sorry Councillor Hanson, that is the one at Hodgeclough Road.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't think that was said on the night. In fact, I remember saying about the chairman gone to the same school as Diane Abbott because his total didn't reflect the total of members of the council, and there were a lot of people chiming in, including the vice chairman, trying to put him right. But I don't think this is a reflection of what happened on July 1st. And I'm saying, as such, I can't accept this as a true record of the minutes.
Well, Councillor, there were 10 members in attendance, and there's 10 votes recorded there, so I'm not really clear what you think's inaccurate.
Well, that's not what he says.
Councillor Hartness?
I do share some of Councillor Upson's concerns, and also after that meeting, which quite frankly was the worst meeting I've ever attended, I wrote with my colleague Councillor Williamson a letter of complaint to the leader of the council and to the chief executive. I'm still awaiting a reply, and I said that as part of that letter pointed out that I felt that procedurally that committee for those the applications in question, that and then the Knowles Lane, were not run correctly and were not appropriate, were not suitable decisions taken. I haven't received a reply, therefore I can't accept these minutes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hartness. Anybody else want to? Councillor Dick?
Yeah, I wasn't on the committee that day, but I spoke against this, and at one point the chair actually proposed and seconded it at one point.
Right, well, thank you very much. Again, as I say, we clearly have advice from our... Sorry, Councillor Davis?
Thanks, Chair. I don't know what games these people are playing here because it was clear what people voted for. It was absolutely clear as day. The chair didn't...
Clear what you voted for.
The chair didn't understand the procedure. He was inexperienced, I agree. But the members who voted, it was clear what they voted for. It was perfectly clear. The numbers are right. Nobody can object to the figures, they're correct.
Right, thank you. And as I say, it's clear that the advice we've had, the legal advice we've had, is that the system was followed correctly and the procedures were followed correctly. So perhaps the legal officer could advise where we stand if half the committee won't agree to the minutes.
Chair, it's for the members to agree that the minutes, so if somebody wants to move that they're satisfied that the minutes are correct or not correct, if that's seconded, then it's a matter of members voting as to whether they agree with the minutes or not.
Councillor Davis?
I suppose it would only be the people that were at the meeting who could agree that the minutes were correct.
Right. Yeah, I'll move the minutes as to the record.
Okay, anybody else want to
Councillor
comment?
Malik, you didn't vote on the Knowles Lane one, yet you weren't down as an abstention.
Excuse me, I've already said we're not accepting interventions for the floor, so could we not start that, please? We've had a motion that the minutes are correct. Anybody else wish to comment?
I'll move they're incorrect.
I'll second that.
Okay, that's very helpful. So can we put that to the vote for the people who were there? Do they agree these minutes are incorrect? Can we have a show of hands, please? Okay, can we have a show of hands for people who don't agree they were incorrect, of people who attended? Okay, so we agree 4 people say they weren't incorrect. So in that case, can we put it to the vote whether the minutes were correct or not? Or those who think they were correct, please show.
It's been moved, it hasn't been seconded.
Sorry, okay. So does anybody would second it, or we're going to leave that open?
Thanks, Chair. I'll second that the minutes are correct.
Thank you very much. So can we have a show of hands for people who say they're correct, of the people who attended that meeting? No, Councillor Hartless, you voted in favour then, I saw you. Thank you very much. Those who think they're incorrect, they are approved as a true record. Thank you very much. Right, so first application is land at St John Street, Paul Street, Edward Street, Oldham. So we'll start off. What will happen is the planning officer will set out the terms of the planning application. He or she will then be open to questions from the committee. The registered objector can then speak for 3 minutes, again open to questions from the committee. We don't have anybody from the applicant scheduled to speak, so after the objector's finished, we will then move on to a committee discussion. So thank you. Thank you.
So this is an application for 68 dwellings at land at St John Street, Paul Street and Edward Street. So here you can see the 2 phases, phase 3 and phase 4 on the site location. Turning first to phase 3, which contains 32 dwellings and an area of public open space in these areas outlined in red here. And phase 4, which contains 36 dwellings, which are 100% affordable housing. So each of the dwellings in both phases have allocated car parking and private residential amenity space to the rear. All of the housing meets with DCLG space standards. I've got a few different house types on here, so I've just shown you an example. Here are some photographs of the site. The site's previously developed historically, although as you can see at the moment, it's just overgrown and cleared. There's phase 4 there as well. See the grade 2 listed Hertford Mill in the background. The setting on the Hertford Mill is addressed in the report and is considered acceptable. So the impact of the scheme on residential amenity is considered acceptable, both within the houses within the site and to the adjacent existing dwellings. The design of the dwellings on both phases 3 and 4 is considered to be both functional and acceptable. No objection has been raised by the
Sorry, can't hear you here.
No objection has been raised by the highway engineer in regards to highway safety or amenity. When considering the application sites 3 and 4 together as a whole, the application proposes 53% affordable housing, which meets and exceeds our guidelines, and an area of public open space is provided on site. The application is recommended for approval accordingly.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the officer? Thank you, Councillor Surgeon.
Hi, thank you for that. I just have a quick question about phase 3. Why is there no affordable housing on that piece of land? Thank you.
My understanding from the developer is that so its first choice homes are going to be looking after the houses in phase 3, and that it's their preference to have those houses on that site together. Obviously, we try to incorporate a mix of affordable housings within the development site as a whole, but consider it such over and above the 10% offer that we struggle to ordinarily achieve. On balance, we consider it acceptable when looking at the 2 sites together, that they had 53% affordable housing when looked at as a whole.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. It's a shame that the developers are not in attendance today. I had a number of questions from the developers. Through the consultation and literature that we've had from the residents, there seems to be very little consultation with the residents. Obviously, this might not be questions yourself in this particular moment in time, but it's a shame that the developer isn't here to, raise these questions too. So I'll refer more in depth when we have an open session. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So can Griffin come forward? Okay, when you're ready, you can just turn the microphone on. My colleague will give you a 30-second warning, and then so when your time ready, so you'll know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm going to read this, if that's okay with you. I have several concerns about and objections to this planning application and the consultation process, most of which are shared by the residents. According to the application information sheet prepared by the Council's case officer, the application was received 20th of March 2019 and the valid date was the 3rd of April. Despite owning two properties which are in close proximity or immediately adjacent to the proposed development, myself and other residents have not received any consultation correspondence from the Council. I welcome an explanation as to why not. The public information pack states that the application was publicised by way of a site notice. I'd like to know where this was cited, as no one living on phase 2 has seen it. The transport statement attached to the planning application only covers phase 3. The traffic impact information used is for between 10 and 50 units. The planning application is for 68 units. The estimation of 44 to 40 respective additional journeys during peak times is far below what would be expected from 68 new units with a combined total of 127 allocated parking spaces. In addition, the planning application proposes an application of 0.3 of a hectare of public open space. The following is an excerpt from Oldham Council's Urban Development Plan. For the development of 30 or more dwelling units, there will be a requirement for on-site provision of public and open space, and this should be at a rate of not less than 30 square metres per dwelling in order to meet the Council's standard of provision. Based on 178 units in phases 1 to 4, this should result in an allocation of 0.53 hectares and not the current proposal of 0.3. Indeed, the previous planning application for the development of phase 3, which was approved in 2009, had an increased allocation of public and open space. I don't find this acceptable for an area which already has a deficit of public open space, and I'm formally requesting a statement from the Council on the standing of its UDP, and if it is still extant, why it's not being adhered to. In addition, DBD Policy 9 outlines that new development proposals must not have a significant adverse impact on the immunity of neighbouring properties. I believe that the development of some of the units outlined in the planning application will have a significant overshadowing and overbearing effect on my home, which will affect both my kitchen and my main bedroom. Lastly, it's clearly evident that the Council's planning consultation procedures have not been adhered to, and as a consequence, this planning application should be declined. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does I'll ask the planning officer to respond to the points you've made specifically. If you would stay in case any of the members have questions after that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So if I first address the notification, so you're quite right to point out the original notification letters. We noticed during the process that the consultation letters were sent to very few people. So after the initial consultation, I resent letters to every dwelling which immediately faced each application site. So this was the further initial notification letters were sent on the 18th of June, allowing for the statutory 21-day consultation period. This ended on the 9th of July. I wrote my committee report. The letters were then sent on the 10th of July, informing residents as to the committee agenda. The site notice was posted on the 11th of April 2019 on a lamppost adjacent the former St John's Walk. Although I am aware of the letter that you've sent, I've received a copy that you sent to a number of councillors. I won't mention specifically the addresses, but...
No, you can name them, it's fine.
Oh, is that okay?
Yeah,
I just didn't want to. The neighbour notification letters were not sent specifically to the two addresses, at 7 Alfred Court and 12A Edward Street, as these addresses do not immediately join the application site. Then the matter of open space is addressed within the committee report, and I've just brought it up here. It's been assessed by officers and is considered both functional and acceptable. I'm going to turn quickly to Steve to address the UDP, and then we'll go to Wendy to address the highways issues.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. Can I just be clear for me, if I have any response I'm allowed to respond to any inaccuracies? No building adjacent to me, a metre away from my boundary, I think is adjacent to my home. Which, do you want to see the plans? That's what they want to build next to me, that 3-storey house, a metre away from my boundary.
Do you want to, I'll write on the plan, do you want to address that?
I think, Chair, that means that Anna's going to just look into that.
Yeah,
So, while we're doing that, if it's Chair, then I'll do the UTP question that you objective question raised. Yes, this is the straight answer. The UTP is still extant, providing the policies are, of course, in line with the NPPF. But members will also be aware that because the council currently doesn't have a 5-year land supply, there is a presumption.
Sorry, could you just, I'm getting a bit old, could you speak a bit for me?
No, I absolutely will. So, repeating what I said, yes, the UDP is extant. It is the current development plan of Oldham Council. The consequence of that is, providing it's in line with the with the national NPPF policies, those policies do have weight. The issue here, however, as the members will be aware, is that the council does not have a 5-year land supply. The consequence of that is very simple, that there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and any policies that restrict development are potentially what's known as out of date. At the last meeting we had a debate about opal policies and various other policies. That does not mean to say that those policies do not have weight, but they have less weight than they normally would. In very simple terms, what the members of this committee will have to do is obviously weigh benefits of the scheme against the harm of the scheme and come to them. Clearly the loss of open space or not having enough open space would have to be weighed against other things, including the benefits of new housing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure members are aware that the expense of the loss of the open space has been as a result of increasing number of units to be built on the site and increasing the private amenity gardens of those units by 70 to 100% from the plans that were passed in 2009.
I think it's fair to say that this application is now being considered on its own merits. So whilst I hear what you say, the committee now will be making a decision on this scheme, and we'll weigh up, as Mr. Irwin said, we'll weigh up the benefits of the housing against the disbenefits, that some of which you have highlighted.
Okay, if first I turn to the address at 12A Edward Street, which faces the park. Sorry, I'll just forget the plan up.
Do you want me to show you it on here? Is that one there? Right, just open up the 3-storey house.
I'd have to check the notification, I'm afraid I don't know.
It's on your list of consultees for residents, which is published.
In that case, I apologise that you weren't notified by letter. In any case, it's been a site notice, and it's been also advertised in the press. So we've fulfilled our statutory consultation requirements of the local authority.
The site notice is nowhere near any access to my house.
is adjacent to the site.
The site notice you're talking about is posted somewhere down here. The access to my property is from here. I don't go out there. I have no need to.
I think we're getting. I think we've got your point that you clearly were not you did not receive an individual letter, and you're obviously saying that you didn't see the site notice because it wasn't posted in the place that would.
I'm also making the point that I think that the proposal will have an unacceptable overshadowing.
No, I understand that. We were just talking about the consultation. I hear what you're saying. I think the position is that the rules on consultation. How can I put this? It's never got right, and we only have to put a site notice. We have a policy in Oldham of notifying individual residents. It's not a statutory requirement. It's just something that we've done historically in Oldham. So I think we have discharged our legal obligations, and whilst I appreciate it's not satisfactory if you didn't get a letter when you're so close, then I can only apologise, but that's not going to invalidate the application. The fact that you say it's going to have a detrimental impact on you is a legitimate point, and obviously that's something the committee has to take into account in determining this application and any other applications. We have to weigh up whether harm caused to material interests, which will be your amenity, are outweighed by the benefits of the scheme, and that's really ultimately the decision that the council committee is making, assuming it complies with policy, and where it doesn't comply with policy, that's is a judgment call. So I take your point, and I would entirely accept that from your point of view you feel that you haven't been consulted and you haven't had the chance to make your point, but I think clearly you have written in and made these points.
I thought it was council policy to consult individual residents.
Well, it's custom and practice, but it's not a legal practice. That's just something that Oldham in their foolishness started many years ago, and it's very difficult. And I can promise you that there's always somebody who gets missed out. However comprehensive it is, there's always somebody who feels they should have been told. I think I'm getting the impression strongly that despite that you've still made representations, and you clearly did because you're here doing it. So I think you can rest assured that the impact on your property has been taken account of by the planning officer. Obviously your judgment and her judgment aren't the same, and that's always a problem. But I do hope you accept you haven't been disadvantaged in that, and we say we are sorry you didn't get individually notified. As we have that policy, it shouldn't have happened, but sometimes these things do. But as you're here and you've had the chance to participate, then I don't think you've been disadvantaged by that.
Which was an accident.
Fair enough. Well, serendipity is always a good thing, so I'm glad you haven't been disadvantaged, but clearly, yes, we can only say we're very sorry if that you didn't get the letter that you should have done, and that's just, I don't know, just one of those things that sometimes happens, but I say in this case.
Will I get a response today about the overshadowing and overbearing impact on my...
Well, I think the planning officer would have taken that into account. That's her job in making the recommendation to committee. Her job is to weigh up the merits of the application. So I'm sure Hannah will comment on that, but I'm sure she has actually done that as part of the consideration. So I'll ask her to actually comment on that specifically.
Because there are guideline distances between windows
yes,
that
there are.
It doesn't meet those.
Whilst we look at distances between habitable room windows, so we look for, in a perfect scenario, 21 metres, there are no guidelines within either national or local planning policy frameworks here at Oldham that specify specifically has to be 21. So we take the
12 metres I've measured it.
we take each assessment, we take the assessment of the impact on each dwelling on its merits, and in this case we've had a look at it and we consider the impact to be acceptable.
12 metres from my bedroom window and 10 metres from my kitchen window. I think that actually does contravene national guidelines because I've looked them up.
Well, again,
It's 15 metres for flat windows, 22 for facing windows. Sorry, Madam Chair.
No,
it's just
not in policy.
It's a degree of disinformation here.
But I think the issue is that when you use the word guidelines, that's what they are, the guidelines. They don't mean you have to comply with them. They're not regulations, they're guidelines. So the planning officer has made an assessment that in this case her professional judgment is that that distance will not cause significant harm to justice
That's
her
in my
professional judgment, and the fact it doesn't comply with guidelines isn't significant in itself because they are only guidelines.
So why does the council and the national government have guidelines if they aren't to
Because
give people guidance?
yes,
There's a big difference between 22 metres as a guideline and the 10 metres measured from my kitchen window to this proposed new house.
I accept that, but that is what the guidelines, that's your starting point, and then you make a decision on each individual application on its merits. Now, I think we're having a very detailed debate, and I'm not sure that I'm handling this at all as my first effort to be a chairman. We've really got completely but sorry, we're waiting for some highway comments. Let's have the highway comments to what are your concerns about highways. Let's have those comments.
Okay, so I'll take the concerns that you have about the highway comments as the transport statement only covers phase 3 with an assessment of between 10 and 50 units. I do apologise for this, but I haven't got the transport statement with me and I couldn't get on the system before I left. So, when I made the assessment of the application, I would have considered the transport statement. Phase 3's got 32 units, so for the assessment to be made for between 10 and 50 units is quite realistic for that. As well as myself, TFGM were also consulted, and they were happy that the expected traffic generation wouldn't have an adverse effect on the local highway network.
How can you say that when the data is based on almost half the proposed number of units? I fail to understand how 68 new units with 127 parking spaces can be forecast to generate 40 new journeys at peak time.
That isn't what I've just said.
No, that's what's in the statement, in fact.
Yeah.
Or in the report.
Well, I haven't been able. That's the first time I heard that concern from you because I didn't see your concerns before the meeting.
And my concern is if they haven't sent in a traffic impact statement based on the full planning application, then you can't know that. You won't have known to look at the new data based on 68 dwellings as opposed to 46 or 10 to 50.
Transport for Greater Manchester will have looked at the data. That we don't just accept the transport statement as truth or fact. We interrogate that, and Transport for Greater Manchester did that, and they're happy. I haven't got the figures here with me, but they're happy that the traffic expected to be generated. These are only forecasts, and we're only using forecasting tools. We're not saying there will definitely be. We're saying we expect there to be.
Based on 10 to 50 units.
Based on the number of units, because TFGM would also have carried out their own interrogation figures. If you see the transport statement submitted by the applicant, we do a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure, as highway officer, and it probably isn't always apparent at the meetings because all this work has been done behind the scenes. If I think a development would affect our highway network, we either propose measures to ensure that they're mitigated against, or we recommend refusal. So if I thought that this proposed development would have an adverse impact on our highway network, I wouldn't be sitting here recommending mitigation measures.
Let's try getting out my drive in the morning.
Sorry, just could you turn your microphone off? I can't get you with it.
Perhaps I can help the members a little bit on this. Members who went to training will obviously remind me of talking about obviously highways issues and the tests that you have to apply for it. I think it may be an apt time to remind members of what it is. For members to take action against something on highways grounds, they either have to prove A, that the impact of the development results in a highway safety issue, or B, that the cumulative impact of the development has to have a severe impact on the highways network. Obviously, when we discussed about members' training, you will remember that the questions that were asked were all around, well, severe is quite a high bar, and that is right. That was exactly the right question that the members should be asking, because it is a severe impact that you have to prove. So if you were turning it down the scheme on those grounds, you would clearly have to prove that it was a severe impact. I'm afraid that if the number of units reflect 68 in total, that is highly unlikely to be able to be supported on appeal. On the highway safety issue, clearly that is about moving around, that is getting off the ground, as the objector says, you have to do a drive. And clearly you would have to consider that there was some issue that people walking along, pedestrians or road users were likely to get into high road safety issue. Again, that is something that members would have to consider if they're looking at that particular issue. Hopefully that's helpful, Chair.
Right, do any members of the committee have any questions for Ms Griffin? Alright, thank you very much. So in that case, I throw it open to discussions. Anybody got any comments they want to make on the proposal? Councillor Iqbal?
Thank you, Chair. I was a member of the planning committee in 2009 when this originally came through, and there seems to be a lot of deviation from the original plans, and a lot more units have been added, and it seems to be detrimental to the current community that live there. Also, the transport statement, my understanding is kind of missing, and also that the developer isn't on site to answer some pertinent questions. I would be mindful to defer it to the next meeting so that the developer can be here and so we can ask them some questions. So that's my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I second that.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? I'm sorry, we don't take questions from the floor.
I was just going to say, I'm from the developer. If you want to speak, I can get up now. No, I'm not doing as a speaker, but
Yeah,
just
well,
offering that up there.
Sorry, I think we already said that the only people who actually put forward or asked to speak or registered, that's the word I'm struggling for, is speakers. Now, as you haven't done that, I don't think I can let you come and rock up and do that. So, Councillor Harkness.
Sorry, so the grounds were proposed and second to defer it because the developer isn't here to answer our questions.
That's what
but they are given an opportunity to come and do that. If they choose not to do that, then surely we should be making a decision based on what's in front of us and the officer's report. If the developer chooses not to come, that's their decision, and we could defer it come next time, and the developer could again decide they're not going to come.
Yeah, well, you're perfectly at liberty to put that as a point of view. It's been moved and seconded that it's deferred on the grounds that more information is required. So I interpret Councillor Iqbal saying. Does anybody else want to comment before we put that to the vote? Councillor Surgeon?
Yes, I agree with Councillor Travis' motion, but I'd like to state that I'd like for a member of the developer to be there for the next meeting on that basis.
So can we just clarify what the questions are that you want to have answered, please? That would be helpful.
The question is, the deviation from the original plans of 2009, the increased number of units, and the lack of open space from the original plans to now.
Yeah, but with due respect, Councillor Iqbal, this is a new application. What was approved previously doesn't matter. We are now looking at this application. So if you're concerned about comparing this application with the previous application, then personally I would suggest that's not grounds for deferral.
Okay, the transport statement from the developer is also, my understanding is missing.
Okay, well that's fair enough. You're obviously taking the point that Ms Griffin made, yes. Okay, sorry, Councillor Davis, no? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that it be deferred. Can we have a show of hands, please, on who supports that proposal? That's 1, 2, 3. Okay, and all those who oppose deferring it? What were the numbers? I wasn't counting, I'm afraid. Sorry? 6, 4. To defer. Anybody abstaining? No. Okay, well it's been agreed then it will be deferred, and we will contact the developer, I suppose, and try and get some more information in the light of the concerns raised by the committee.
Yeah, just to confirm that we will be asking the questions that Councillor file and put forward around dealing with the missing transport statement, around why deviate from the existing plan, why they increase numbers, and lack of open space. I think that's okay.
Okay, thanks so much. Right, we're moving to the application for the board's first business park at Oldham Brewery. So again, the procedure wasn't the same. The planning officer will set out the terms of the application and will be open to questions. The objector will then have 3 minutes to put their case. Again, open to questions. The applicant will then have the right to reply, also 3 minutes. And then we can hand it over to the field. So if we can start, Hannah, it's you again, I believe.
So this is a retrospective application for a change of use of an industrial Class B2 floor space to use as a drinking establishment, Class A4, in Unit 18 in association with the existing brewery use at Unit 17. So here you see the site location plan, which identifies the access to the building, and Unit 18. Unit 19 is not included within this site location plan, and Unit 17 is outlined in blue as other associated land. So Unit 17 here is shown as the actual brewery, whereas Unit 18 is currently operating as A4 use class, and that's what we've applied for to hope to regularise. So here you can see a proposed site plan. These 10 car parking spaces can be used by Doncaster's as part of their lease agreement. So I've had sight of that, and you can see the bar area here. It's, I'm sorry to say, not very clear. This squiggly bit is supposed to say smoking area. At the moment, Doncaster's are using this area to the rear as a sort of informal seating smoking area, which you'll see some pictures as we go along. So here you can see some site photographs outside. We've got Unit 18, Unit 17 here. Very typical of an industrial estate. I've tried to take some photos to show the wider car park, which is quite sort of relatively informal parking there. The existing area that they use outside at the moment. And then here's some photographs within Unit 17. So here you see sort of a corrugated metal unit with absent of any sort of soundproofing. Now you'll note from the late list that and from the conditions attached to the officer report that we have assessed noise and disturbance coming from the unit. So if I discuss inside the unit in the first instance, so we're proposing a scheme for a condition addressing a scheme for noise attenuation to soundproof inside the unit. So we're hoping that this unit can be adequately soundproof. So we're asking for a scheme to be submitted to the local authority to be approved in writing, and we'll work with our environmental health team to ensure that's up to an adequate standard. Again, you can see photographs here within Unit 17. The original committee report allowed an area for use outside up until 9 o'clock. You'll note from the late list that that's no longer the case. We're proposing a condition which restricts all outdoor use of the building for drinking and eating and noise associated with that. Although a condition has been added for a scheme for a smoking shelter. As you understand it, people, uses associated with it, or people tend to want to go outside for a cigarette, and if they are doing that, we'd rather them do it in a specific area in agreement with us, so as to not cause noise and disturbance as they go inside to smoke, but not to drink. So an assessment of the application, we've considered that there's no significant impact on the highway safety or the highway network. In regard to its impact on residential amenity, proposed development is considered acceptable, subject to the inclusion of the noise mitigating conditions that I've just spoken about, and there are no design or other concerns raised by this application, and the application is recommended for approval by officers accordingly. Now, I do have, Steve has some comments to make on the planning history, so I'll pass it over to him for some further presentation.
I'm not sure how it was that. The members will see in front of them that as well as the main application, there is a quite long late list report. consider that, and I've just looked at that, and I think therefore it's worthwhile actually going through that, because it does actually change quite a lot of the positions and deal with some of the residents' concerns directly. Members will also probably receive a letter from a company, the name is Gately Legal, and I thought for the members' benefit it would also be worth going through that letter and identifying why we don't think the concerns raised on that letter have particular merit. So, as you can see from your latest report, you can see that there are 3 letters report. They don't actually add anything to what was previously said. However, you will also see that residents did put in some concern about the original condition around outside areas being unclear, and the consequence of that is that they argued that using the car parks and the courtyard areas were creating some problems, and specifically they illustrated that last weekend the applicant arranged with their bar to use the bar and associated courtyard for a gathering point for a tractor derby, and they sent them some photographs of that. And clearly, you can see that that event was clearly like to create noise, fumes, and disturbance position. Clearly, we don't want to do that. The industrial estate is surrounded by residential, and as a consequence of that, we determined that it wasn't worth. We decided to amend Condition 7, and in particular, the reason for that was twofold. You will see here, as Hannah's already identified, the rear area. The residents are here. Using that outside area is obviously likely to create noise and disturbance to residents here. Using the front area here, which was originally considered to be okay, well, as you can see, members, that the issue there is quite clear. There is a car park, and therefore a clear issue around highway safety, people coming out here and using that space. As a consequence of that, you will see that we've now added this condition, which basically says that no outside areas should be used for eating and drinking purposes, and the reason for that is very straightforward. That it will protect the amenity of nearby residents and also ensure highway safety. Again, just reminding the members that potentially you have people coming out into this area, which is obviously used as a car park, and there's potential for conflict with cars. So that's why we've come on and obviously moved onto that. The second question is that you will see that there's been a lot of concern about the red line boundary. There it is for the members. You can see it comes from this service road here, it goes around the back, and people have raised issues around that. We think it considers, as officers, clearly the position that we're talking about, which is obviously Unit 18, where the brewery is meant to go, and clearly it doesn't include Unit 17, which is of course the brewery itself. The applicant is not applying for any planning permissions or changes in that, and we think that that's an adequate position on that. Moving on. The residents have said, oh, it's not actually used for industrial purposes, this site, Class B2 use, it's actually used for B1 purposes. Obviously, we've looked at the history of this site. It's fairly clear that the site's a former mill site, Hurst Mill, in the past, and that's obviously, in looking at the history, we've come to the conclusion that it is a B2 use. Of course, some of those units in here, of course, have moved to B1. The reason for that is very simple. They don't require planning permission to do that, as the members will know. Permitted development rights, and one of the permitted developments you have a right is you can move from Class B to Class B1. As a consequence of that, we don't think that that is a particular issue with this particular application. There's a very long lot of information from the residents around the previous use of the history of this particular site. In particular, residents very kindly have sent us information on the 2002 planning permission, which they consider proves that there were conditions attached to it, one of which restricts the use of the operating hours for this industrial park between up to 6 p.m. on Monday to Saturday, and therefore obviously that limits the use of the business park. The problem that we found with that is that whilst that information has been provided, we cannot categorically say that the uses numbers 17, 18 and 90 are covered by that permission. That is the map that the residents sent in, and obviously the first question that the members will ask is first of all, where is units 17, 18 and 19? That's the area that we're talking about, and obviously the members will notice one thing there, the units aren't there. Secondly, the members will go, that's fair enough, Steve, red line boundary, but of course I've only got a black and white photocopy there. How can you, where can you show where the red line is? And the answer is you can't, because of course that's the only information we've got. Council's records don't show where the red line boundary is. Therefore, I absolutely accept the position that residents are saying that it is most likely that it is covered by that restriction, but of course I can't actually prove that at any stage for the reasons I've pointed out, that the units aren't shown on that, and I don't actually have any red line. The consequence of that is you can't do it. Nevertheless, even if you members accept the view that the scheme is restricted, members have to remember, as Councillor Brownridge has already mentioned, that each case has to be treated on its own merits. The applicant has put in an application to move the operating hours and change the use of this particular site. As a consequence of that, members will have to obviously independently look at it, as suggested by Councillor Brownridge earlier. Obviously, you can see what we've been said that we've been argued that officers have been misleading members on that. You will see quite clear what is said in our report. It's page 19 of your actual report. It says it's not clear what the conditions and subsequent restrictions are. The consequence of that is obviously, we've obviously made it very clear that we're just not sure for the reasons that we've outlined earlier. You'll see in your pack that we've revised condition 2. You can see it there. I don't think there's really much to add about this, and I'd just like to welcome the opportunity just to remind a member that this gentleman to my left, Paul Bailey, is one of our senior environmental health officers, and he will be able to help you about those issues around this particular condition, the noise restraint condition, and obviously to talk about the potential noise coming out of that, because he's an expert in that field, and obviously Hannah and myself are perhaps more keen actors maybe in that particular respect. Then I'm afraid going to have to bring you on, there was an additional condition, and sorry I forgot about that. You remember that Hannah talked about having to put out an outdoor smoking area. That condition is obviously in your report, and that condition is obviously there to make sure that we get that in a suitable position that doesn't that protects residents mentally in the area. I'm afraid now we have to move on to the rather legal letter that you will have received. I'm afraid I'm going to have to take you through this very slowly. Again, I apologise for that, but it's worthwhile just to make sure that the council is doing everything absolutely correctly, and that the members are totally aware of what's being said and why we think that the letter in question does not have any meaning. The letter, of course, was sent in to members at 11:31 today, as you know. Obviously, that's the day of the committee. It's very late, so obviously the members will make their own views about whether the reasonableness of that. Obviously, we consider that the letter, the applicant says in the letter that the only course of action for the council is to refuse this application. Officers don't believe that. We believe that clearly it's for the members to make a decision on that application, obviously weighing up the merits of the scheme or otherwise, and the views expressed that we're going to hear later from obviously objectors and supporters of the scheme. The letter considers the development plan provisions weren't properly considered, and particularly talks about policy 4E. You will see in your report, and I'll put it on the screen for you, that there is policy 14, and it quite clearly indicates at the bottom there that in an employment business employment area, change of use to A4 use, the use that's being applied for here, is on the list of acceptable uses. And I thought you might want to see that, which is the policy, an extract from it, which quite clearly shows that that use is a suitable use for this type of use. That knocks on the head the position put forward by residents, because they consider that quote that there are no material considerations in favour of this application being approved. Clearly, as you can see from that particular position, that's got drinking establishment in that clearly it is in line with our policy. As such, the points that I'm making about policy 14 are incorrect and do not stand up. The letter obviously raises issues about the Class B1 use of the premises. I've gone over that already, the reasons why we consider that the use is B2, broadly speaking, because it's going to be turned from a former mill site and has been used for that purposes, and I explain why some of the uses are used for B1 because of permitted development rights. Moving on. Not very computer literate. This quote here, again, it's in your report on page 23, has been used by the objectors to the scheme say that that we're misleading members on that particular point. You can see that all that quote is actually just a statement of opinion. It's opinion of office. It's not a statement of fact. And clearly, it's for the members to consider whether that statement is correct. That we can't refuse the use on the basis of noise and disturbance or not. That is for the members to decide. We haven't misled the members in any way. That is a quote. That's just an officer's opinion, as you would typically get in any sort of planning report. Moving on, again, I want to go over the 2002 permission, but again I'll just remind members that it's not there. We don't have a red line. Consequence of that is, whilst the applicant's claiming that we should be considering that, we don't think A, that we've got any evidence to support that, and B, of course, members will be fully aware that each case has to be treated on its own merits. I think all the stuff in the report clearly gives you the ammunition to consider whether the scheme is acceptable or not, and of course you have an opportunity to ask questions on that, both to me as a planning officer, to the applicant, to the objectors, and of course to Paul from environmental health. On that basis, I think you can be safely assured that you'll be able to ask any questions you want on that particular subject. Revised condition 7, we did agree with the letter saying that we felt that they argue that the outside areas need to be removed. You'll remember that we added that condition specifically to deal with that particular point. Nearly at the end, unfortunately, members, there's an argument put forward that we didn't consider highways issues. There is the stuff, obviously, relating to the highways matters. It's in your report. You can see it on page 22 of your report, and you can see that the conclusion is one, that A, that the scheme won't detrimentally affect the highways network, certainly not severely. B, it won't result in highway safety. Obviously, we'll go back to the red line boundary. Well, we've heard the argument on that, so I won't repeat that any further, other than to say that we consider that as a reasonable red line. And the consequence of that is, overall, having gone through the letter and having considered it, we hope you can see that some of the points made in that don't stand up. And obviously, you still have an opportunity to ask any questions that you have on that, and obviously consider the issues going forward. And with that, Chair, I apologise for taking so long.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Does any member have a question for the planning officers or any of the other officers for that matter? Any questions? Councillor Hudson?
Well, I first of all would like to thank Anna Lucet, the planning officer, for trying to introduce all these extra conditions to meet the demands of the public, and I do think she's done a good job. I think the problem was here that she was always on a loser because the decision wasn't hers. It was many years ago when I sat in a room across in the Crompton Suite where I said building houses near an industrial unit would eventually land to problems, and we have arrived at those problems. So I'd like to ask Anna, it talks about 9 o'clock. Is that the time that is now recommended, 9 o'clock finish?
So my original report had 9 o'clock finish for outside areas, as long as it didn't include the rear. But after, and that was sort of married up with the licensing conditions. But after that, on the late list, we subsequently decided that no outdoor use of the area would be appropriate for eating or drinking associated with the A4 use.
Thank you, Councillor Hartness.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to, I've got the environmental health officer here, what work has been done around the noise on site currently, because I understand a number of residents have complained already about there being significant noise at the site.
We've had the bar has been operating, I believe, for a number of months. We've had 2 separate complaints from separate houses in the months. I believe it was following unusual circumstances at the premises where they play live music. That generated complaints. We've tried we have installed recording equipment in the complainant's homes on 3 separate occasions, and we've never been able to manage to record a problem that warranted our intervention.
Sorry, can I ask a clarification? That when you say the problems for your interventions, does that mean the statutory noise nuisance?
It does, yes. Yeah.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. I just have a quick question. So just to reiterate, can you just confirm that you said that the recommendation is for not for outdoor use?
Yes, so from the late list, the recommendation is now that none of the outdoor areas be used for eating or drinking.
Okay, and just another quick question. It says in the report that the recommendation is as well for windows and doors to be closed. So I just want to ask about the feasibility of that happening so that neighbours don't get disturbed. Thank you.
It's not an uncommon condition to ask for. So if you have a noise attenuation scheme, obviously it's not doing any good if all the windows and doors are then open. So we would ask that would be enforced if they were found in breach of it, if it was granted permission.
So it will be a condition of the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Al-Hadari?
Just with reference to not being able to measure or get a sort of measurable level of sound from, was your equipment in place when there were events ongoing in the brewery?
Yes, the equipment was in for a week when the bar was operating on 3 separate occasions.
Can I ask perhaps if you could explain for members who are not familiar what constitutes a statutory noise nuisance as opposed to a noise nuisance?
Well, a statutory noise nuisance is a noise nuisance in law under the Environmental Protection Act, and so noise from the premises can be a statutory nuisance. What's a nuisance is something that materially affects the average everyday person's reasonable enjoyment of their property.
So I think just to clarify, the fact that there wasn't a statutory noise nuisance, the Environmental Health Officer isn't saying there wasn't a noise nuisance, or residents feel it's a noise nuisance, and I think it's important to actually hold on to that distinction. Councillor Hartless, did you want to have another go?
Yeah, there was one. So I understand the brewery got a licence, which I know is a different committee, in September 2017, and I've had correspondence from residents which said that since day one practically, the brewery had been using it in the way that they now want to do as retrospective. It always annoys me when people put in retrospective applications anyway. So I'm just thinking, September 2017, there's an issue there. I suppose, you know, there are complaints from environmental health, but on the planning side of things, why have we now got to July 2019 and we're only now getting an application from the applicant?
I believe that the applicant has been in touch with although I have to say, not with me directly, but has been in touch with planning officers for a little while whilst they've been preparing their application. We're aware it's clearly retrospective. I don't think there's any question in having obviously seen the photographs as well. I don't think there's any attempt to mask that, but it gets to this point where they're now hoping to regularise that. Though, as much as I realise that it's not ideal, that we end up in a situation where something that requires planning permission has gone over that line, you know, before we've had the opportunity to assess it. I think now that they're coming to hope to regularise it, this is our opportunity to make that assessment, and so we should look at it on its merits at this stage. I think Steve just wants to make a comment.
Yeah, I think I can add Councillor Hartless's some colour, some information. When I saw the original licence, it was set out as a tasting bar that was going to be used by people who were going to buy obviously the wares of the bar. That was fine because obviously that would have been ancillary to the principal use of the premises as a brewery. We've got over the time period complaints from residents saying it was used as a bar. We sent our enforcement team out. They confirmed that that was the case. The applicant then argued that the use was ancillary and that it was required an application to be submitted. We therefore had to ask the applicant to submit that. To their credit, they took it on the chin and obviously did have made the application, which is the subject of today. And again, we've had a lot of complaints about the late night operating and things about that, but we felt that it was best, obviously, because the job we have is a classic planning conundrum here. On the one basis, obviously, the bar produces jobs, it produces it's an entertainment facility that's loved by people who use it, but on the other hand, you have to protect the benefit, the residents' amenity, and what you've got is a classic issue where members will have to balance those two issues up and come to a decision. So hopefully that explains how we got to where we are.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hewitt.
Chair, this is for the environmental. When I used to win the Grand Hotel, and used to have live bands on there, that's a heavily built up area. A red light used to come on when you used to reach 80 decibels, it'd give them 5 decibels leeway. So as soon as the red light came on, I'd actually pull the plug on the amplifier so we can get into trouble. Have you done any noise assessments from outside of the establishment?
All the assessments that we've done with the recording equipment that we've installed inside the complainants' homes. We haven't done any assessments outside the homes or outside the premises. It's all been done from inside the complainants' homes to establish whether or not it was causing a nuisance at the time they were complaining about it, and we were unable to establish that it was causing a nuisance. But going back to those limiters, yeah, they're quite common in bars.
Oh, are they? I thought it was
yeah, yeah, you can. So what that does is that has a microphone inside. You set the level depending upon your insulation of your building and close proximity of the neighbours. When you get to that level, if you get above it, it will warn you for a second, and then if you go above that level, it will cut the electricity to the amplifiers, etc. That's called a noise limiter, quite common.
Councillor Price. Can I ask, you said you put this equipment in for a week. Was there something going on in that particular week when you put this equipment in people's homes? Because a week's not a very long time, and sometimes there might be an event going on at the weekend after you've taken that equipment out.
We got a complaint that there was regular problems, regular disturbance with noise from the premises from 2 separate people. So we installed the noise limiter and asked them to make recordings. Some recordings were made, and we've installed it on 3 separate occasions, but we've not established that there is a problem in terms of noise. That we can take action for.
Councillor Oldham.
Sorry, and it is slightly coming back to that. Because there is already a licence in place for its use as a taster bar, so we know that there is some operation kind of going on, and this is then taking the use further and potentially later. Do you know whether it was in use just as a taster bar, or whether there was sort of extended use going on at the time of which you were monitoring?
I don't know the precise use of it. All I know is that the complainants were saying they were regularly disturbed by noise from the premises, so we put in a recorder for a week, and we found that it weren't.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Chair. So, how far away are these houses from the units?
I addressed this within the report, just 1 second. So we've said 30 metres to the nearest dwelling to the front, and it's slightly less than that to the rear. Sorry, that's from the unit itself, not the outdoor area.
We'll come back 30 metres, so it's at 90 feet, old school.
I don't work old school.
See? Is it roughly 90 feet? Right, so I mean, the use of modern construction, this is now for the environmental officer again, sorry. Yeah, with the use of modern construction techniques, double glazing and, you know, I don't know, with it fill the bits in between the walls and stuff. Would 85 decibels run for a unit 100 feet away? Would it cause an impact on them properties?
It would be difficult to say conclusively. 85 decibels isn't very loud at all. That would be the loud of the noise of a lot of people in the bar just talking. So it doesn't appear to be at the moment doing that. It doesn't appear to be causing a problem, the noise of people in the bar at the moment, from what we've tried to establish when we put our recording equipment in. So it'd be a guess, because I haven't carried out an installation check or anything, but I would guess that 85 decibels in that bar now wouldn't cause a problem to the neighbours, provided there were no windows or doors around.
Okay, everybody asked the questions I wanted to ask. Good. Can we ask Mr. Paladin to come and present his objection, please? Thank you again. My colleague will remind you when you've got 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may just make the point that actually the objectors were informed a priori. Councillor Hewitt had excused himself from this meeting. He's shown pre-determination as a matter of public record on this issue, and I'd like that to be put in the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Committee, thank you. My name is Alex Flanagan. I live on Kinders Lane in Greenfield, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and many other local residents. We've lived adjacent to this light industrial unit undisturbed by it until the applicant started his business. We were undisturbed because the site has always had strict conditions attached to the unit since 1997 with regard to noise levels, operating hours and movement of vehicles. In 2017, Donkeystone requested to open a brewery with a small ancillary tasting bar. Over time, the ancillary bar unlawfully morphed into a public bar, and it hosts live music and other events and is hired out for private parties. The activities are also conducted outside the premises, using the car park and outside of other units, allowing people to eat, drink and socialise. Local residents have had a pub open in their back garden every weekend. We have children shouting, playing, kicking footballs against fences, and adults drinking, smoking, even urinating against fences. Photographs and videos proving this have been sent to OMBC. How would you feel about this if it was in your garden? The applicant has garnered much support for this application from as far away as Penrith. On entry to the premises, an iPad was brought out making you sign on online petition support. On the face of it, that's not a bad thing for a local business to try and grow, but this is not really about the business, it's about neighbouring residents. There have been approximately 70 objections, 100% from Greenfield, 82% within 100 metres of the premises. To add insult to injury, all of this activity has been going on unlawfully. The pertinent change here is to open 6 days a week till 11:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. every Sunday. There are currently restrictions imposed on this very council, by this very council, on the buildings in which the applicant operates. These restrict any operations, including vehicle movement, till 6 p.m. on Monday, Saturday, none at all on Sundays and bank holidays. These restrictions have been enforced for 3 decades by OMBC to protect local residents and amenities. If you approve this application, you will be setting a legal precedent, and it will either be challenged by way of judicial review or exploited by other businesses taking advantage of your decision, claiming that change of use from light industrial to a public house in a quiet residential area is acceptable. The applicants would have you believe their main objective is to create local jobs, prop up the community, support local charities. This is to be applauded, but it's not. Don't be fooled here. This is not a charity. This is not a community project. This is a business. And it's one,
30 seconds.
It's one which your head of planning has acknowledged in writing has misled OMBC. What should really happen is that the application should be refused. Please refer to the urgent letter sent to you by Gately Legal. As a damage limitation, what needs to happen is for the operating hours to be in line with existing operations hours on the site. This is a really serious issue affecting the lives of very many families living close to the business park, which has of course become the applicant has misled residents and your colleagues. The problem will be made far worse by allowing this application in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you very much, well done. Just stay there in case any members have got questions for Councillor Hewitt to start with.
Yes, Chair, there's no predetermination. I have had looked at this once or twice, but there's definitely no predetermination. I'm treating this case as honorary.
Okay, thank you.
If I make a bet, Chair, on that?
No, I don't want to get into debate about this.
Well, it's a matter of public record, Chair, so I do feel it's important.
Chair, it's a matter for individual members as to whether they think they've predetermined an application, because they will know what they've done. So if Councillor Hewitt has said what he said, it's a matter for him. You've heard what he said. If you don't agree with it, well, you're entitled to that, but it's his decision as to whether he thinks he's predetermined an application or not.
So does anybody else have any questions, Councillor Hartness?
You mentioned that the applicant had been misleading residents. I just wondered if you could expand a little bit on that and what you meant by that.
Because initially, the residents were very supportive. With nothing against the brewery, I don't think you'll find anyone who has a grudge against the brewery itself. The problem is that we were told a small ancillary tasting bar was going to be open. What has actually happened is we've got a fully blown live entertainment nighttime economy venue in the back garden, and it's all in the front garden for other residents. So while we've got no objections really to the brewery and we wish it every success, what we really cannot find acceptable is this use of a light industrial building which it's impossible to soundproof, with all due respect, as a public bar operating till 11:30, 6 nights a week and 10 o'clock on Sunday. It just destroys any public peace, especially at weekends and especially in the evening.
Thank you. Anybody else got a question, Mr. Flanagan? No? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Flanagan. We'll now ask Mr. James to come and speak in favour of the application. Right, you also have 3 minutes. You'll be given a 30-minute warning. Okay, 30 minutes. 30 seconds. Very Freudian, sorry.
Good evening, Chair and Councillors. I don't want to keep you here for too long, so I've just knocked up a few bullet points in a statement form for you, just to help you with your decision today. We have been operating as a brewery with an ancillary tap room for the past 2 years. When we first decided that we were going to totally move into the unit, we approached the licensing department and planning department. At the time, we were advised that it's an ancillary part of the main business, which is the brewery. That is proved by both our takings, opening hours, and the amount of beer that's sold. It equates to about 10% of the actual operational use of the business, and it's not a separate business, it's exactly the same business. The tap room is a vital part of any modern microbrewery of our size. It allows us to showcase our products at their very best, fresh from the source. It gives our customers a greater sense of connection with the end product to see where it has been made. In the highly competitive market that we are in, it is an essential tool that we allow us to create a following for our brand and our products. In the past 6 months, we have been able to create 3 new full-time jobs thanks to our growing popularity, of which the tap room has been a crucial part of. We now employ 5 full-time staff and 4 part-time staff at the brewery. If the retrospective change of use were to be denied, then we would be forced to move the brewery to a new location where a tap room would be allowed, possibly out of the borough. This would cost the business itself in excess of £25,000 from estimates that we've looked into. Over the past 2 years, the tap room has offered a quiet, relaxed venue for local families, visitors to the area, to enjoy our range of ales. It is not being used as a 24-hour party venue as the objectors would like you to believe. It has also given us a great venue from which we've been able to host events to help promote other local businesses in the area. We have also hosted a number of charity events at the tap room, raising thousands of pounds for various charities. I don't believe that's a bad thing for any business to do. Over the past 2 years of operation, there have been no issues with antisocial behaviour relating to the tap room that can be proved. We wish to continue to operate the tap room in the same professional, considerable manner in which we have done to date. If the retrospective change of use is granted, this will allow us to continue to operate as we are currently, and for the business to flourish and become a great brewery that the area can be proud of. And just quickly, I've got a couple of seconds. do seem to be informed as they need 24-hour access to the emergency service. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to start. I've got two questions. One, can you explain the difference between a tasting bar, a tap room, and a pub? Because to me, in my naivety, a tasting bar sounds like somebody's going to come and put in an order for barrels of beer, taste it first, not somebody who just comes and enjoys a pint. So can you just distinguish between a tasting bar and an actual public house, if you would, for me, please?
Yes, the public house will typically be open 7 days a week. The hours are till 11 o'clock. Our tap room is only in operation, open to the public on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays. Fridays is currently open and has been for the last 2 years from 5 o'clock in the afternoon till 10 o'clock in the evening. Saturdays 4 o'clock till 10 o'clock in the evening. Sundays 12 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the evening. And that has been the case from the start, and we're not planning to change any of that. We do want to be able to use premises or use the tap room during the week on occasions. So if there's a clause in there whereby we can't use it during the week, then that may restrict us from being able to use it on occasions for charitable events or the like.
I'm confused now because your application is to open it 6 days a week and on Sundays for much longer hours than that.
No, the application is purely for us to be able to allow the use of the premises for those times. We don't actually open them during those times.
Yeah,
our license for the premises grow. Our premises license, which we granted 2 years ago, also allows us for the same hours as the planning application does. And that therefore we haven't then just gone about open 7 days a week, because that's our intention. Our primary intention is to operate as a business, as a brewery, but we need the tap room as a vital part of that business to allow us to showcase our products to customers and also retail customers and other
But the difficulty you have, if we grant you the planning permission you've applied for, you can open until 11:30, 6 days a week, until 10:30 on a Sunday. Whether you're going to do that or not is immaterial. That is the result of the consent that would be granted if this application is approved.
That's correct. With regards to being open, yes, 11:30 would be a restriction. And that's also the planning to decide whether they believe that is suitable or not for the application.
My second question was, knowing that the residents are concerned about the noise and disturbance that they say they suffer, why, when the application was submitted, did you not put any information about noise and any information about possible mitigation measures you could have taken?
We did actually. We supplied records of all our recordings. We have a documented book where we actually browse and we monitor the sound at various different points and locations throughout the site, both inside and outside. That is all recorded and we sent through a copy of all that to the planning department.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Hartness?
Now, forgive me if I've got this incorrect, but it sounded as if from what you were saying is that you've run since 2017 just a tap bar, and that's permitted. Whilst that, for most of the time you've done that, and you seem to be suggesting that planning were happy with that. Now, that seems to be a complete contrast with what we were told earlier, because the planning enforcement office has been out there, and it seems to have been a long-running issue for quite a long period of time, where it's been from pretty much day one been done in the way that your application says, and also, you know, and you've gone ahead and carried on doing that period of time. Haven't, you know, the business rates which would have been paid if you were doing that, which you haven't been paid. The brewery is, you know, it's, you know, the actual beer is great, and, you know, if it was just as it was, as was agreed before, I'm sure people wouldn't be objecting to that. But I think, you know, when you say things like that, it does concern me a bit. And I think from what a resident pointed out, and I actually in January, we had an advert in the local newspaper, and then, you know, we've got to this stage now where we've put in a retrospective application. So if you can comment on that.
Just to clarify that, I mean, like I said before, when I first time planning, I had no idea about when
officers, but they're not officers of Oldham Council.
The people who I spoke to, they spoke to Oldham Council for the department and they agree.
Anybody else? Right, okay, so I think there's an element of confusion here that you start off with the tap bar would be ancillary to the brewery use, and the allegation and contention is that at some point over time it's morphed into something more and has now become an independent drinking establishment that the planning department says needs express planning permission, hence its retrospective applications. I think if I might make some comments, I accept that the Environmental Health Office is saying it's a technical solution to mitigating the noise coming out of the building through the implementing of the noise attenuation scheme, and hence the condition we have here that says that scheme must be submitted and approved and implemented within 3 months of it being approved. I think my concern is that we hear very strongly from residents that there is a noise nuisance being caused now. Now, while it's not a statutory noise nuisance, it's like many things, noise is a very subjective thing. If you live behind somewhere, and I mean, I have neighbours who have parties in their garden. On the 2 downstairs we get a year, so I can tolerate it because it's only 2 downstairs. And they're out till 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're only drinking and talking, but because it's quiet and because they're drinking, it's very, very loud and it's very disturbing. I don't take action against it because it doesn't happen often, but I illustrate that merely to show that noise nuisance is a subjective thing. So the fact it's not a statutory nuisance doesn't mean that it's not happening, and clearly residents feel that it's happening. I think I would feel more happy if we actually had the details of that attenuation scheme before we grant the permission. So my feeling should be, we should say, I would propose that we refuse this application now, but on the very clear understanding that if the applicant can produce a scheme that satisfies that condition and then implements it, the concerns we are concerned about would be addressed. So my proposal would be that we refuse it on grounds of noise nuisance. I don't know if it's involved with the chair to do that, but that's what I'm doing. Thank you. Anybody else want to comment? Let's hear it.
Madam Chair, would it not be better just to defer it or noise segregation?
If you want to make an alternative recommendation, Councillor Hugh, you're quite free to do that.
Madam Chair, I recommend deferment until on the application the noise segregation is submitted.
Okay. I would suggest that there's a time limit put on that, but yes, okay, that's fine. Does anybody want to second that proposal? It would appear not. Okay, so we would move then, unless anybody else has got any final?
Just to remind members, obviously, if you are minded to refuse it against what's the recommendation, you have to do so for valid planning reasons, and you need to provide evidence to substantiate what you want to do so in the event of any otherwise there would be a risk of costs or against the council.
Mr. Irving has a comment to make on that.
Yeah, I've obviously heard the debate, and obviously you're going to be moving for refusal, so I've got to help the members out by suggesting a reason for refusal. That would be helpful to members.
Yeah, all right, Councillor Hunter, go first.
I understand what the information would be given, but I would put more emphasis on it. And the people giving the warning should have given that warning to say earlier on we voted on minutes on July 1st, and there's a lot of members here weren't here on July 1st. Shouldn't we have warned them that only people that were here on July 1st should have voted?
We did say
so
that.
In which case, I'm very worried about the information we're getting. It's very patchy on different things.
Councillor Hudson, I made it very clear that when we put the minutes to the vote, the only people who were at that meeting on the 1st of July
did only those
only those people voted, yes, I can promise you that. So do you have any comments on this noise issue specifically?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. stated reason for refusal is that the cumulative impact of noise disturbance and related activities that would result because of the change of use of Unit 18 would be harmful to the living conditions of existing residents and would therefore be contrary to policy 9 of the local plan that seeks to